The morning sun had barely begun its climb over the city skyline, but the Little Brook Cafe was already buzzing with life. The smell of freshly ground coffee beans mingled with the faint aroma of toasted bagels, forming an invisible invitation to anyone walking past the cafe windows. Baristas moved with a rhythmic efficiency, the hum of espresso machines punctuating the chatter of early risers, freelancers hunched over laptops, and couples in quiet conversation. At a corner table, a man in a dark hoodie and sunglasses stirred his cappuccino with deliberate calm, seemingly absorbed in the swirl of foam that danced like clouds in his cup. The cafe, oblivious to the high-profile presence in their midst, went about its morning rituals. Officer Daniel Blake was in the cafe that morning, his uniform crisp, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He was not there for coffee, nor for a casual stroll. He was there on official business, a vague complaint from a street about a suspicious man loitering outside. Blake prided himself on vigilance, on noticing things others didn't. As he stepped inside, his eyes scanned the room with meticulous suspicion. The man in the hoodie caught his attention immediately. There was something about him, or so Blake convinced himself, that screamed trouble, though he could not articulate exactly why. Without a moment's hesitation, Blake approached the table. "Sir," he said, voice sharp enough to make nearby customers glance up, "I need you to step away from that table." The man looked up slowly, a faint smile curving his lips, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, his voice smooth, easy, the kind that could calm even the most tense room. Blake, however, was undeterred by charm or casual demeanor. "You've been observed acting suspiciously, and I need to ensure the safety of this establishment," he said, leaning in slightly, his tone teetering between authority and accusation. The man nodded as if considering this seriously, then leaned back, letting the air between them thicken. "I see," he said slowly. "You're just doing your job, right? I respect that." There was a warmth in his tone, almost teasing, but Blake mistook it for sarcasm. He squared his shoulders, a flash of irritation crossing his face. "Yes, doing my job. Now stand up," and, in a tragic turn of overzealousness, Blake grabbed the cup of cappuccino from the table, misjudged the angle, and in a flustered attempt to demonstrate authority, poured the steaming coffee over the man's head. The cafe erupted into shocked gasps. The man froze for a heartbeat, his hoodie now drenched, dark liquid cascading down his face and neck. The room was silent for a beat too long. Customers clutched their cups, unsure whether to intervene or laugh at the absurdity. The man wiped at his eyes, his glasses now fogged and sticky. He looked at Blake with a calm, almost amused expression, the kind that made the officer's blood run cold in a very unfamiliar way. "Really," the man said, voice gentle but incredulous. "Coffee? On my head." Blake, flushed with a mixture of pride and panic, waved his hands as though they could justify the act. You were acting suspicious. I'm a police officer. I have to maintain order," he sputtered, the words falling over each other like bricks from a shaky wall. It was then that a small voice from the corner piped up. "Hey, don't you know who that is?" A young barista, barely out of high school, leaned on the counter, eyes wide. Blake, mortified, turned to glare at her, but she didn't flinch. That's Will Smith," she whispered. Blake froze mid-breath, the name lodging in his throat like a stone. "Will Smith?" he stammered, disbelief making his voice rise. The man, Will, touched his dripping hoodie with a resigned sigh and peeled off his sunglasses. The cafe collectively exhaled, the tension shifting instantly from suspense to comedic horror. Will Smith's expression was perfectly calm, bordering on amused, as if this were a rehearsal for a sketch. "You just poured coffee on me," he said softly, his tone almost hypnotic in its calm authority. Blake swallowed, feeling a wave of humiliation sweep over him. The officer's badge suddenly seemed smaller, his uniform suddenly heavier. Around them, the cafe was alive with murmurs and suppressed laughter. Some customers had begun recording on their phones, anticipating the viral moment they were witnessing in real time. Will stood, dripping but composed, and regarded Officer Blake with a look that was both kind and impossible to escape. "I get it," he said, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You were just doing your job. But maybe next time, a little caution goes a long way." Officer Blake's face burned hotter than the coffee he'd just spilled, and he froze mid-step as reality sank in. Every eye in the cafe was on him, some wide with disbelief, some already lifting phones to capture what might be the viral video of the morning. The barista, who had been seconds away from scolding Blake for disrupting the cafe, now leaned against the counter, trying not to laugh outright. "Sir, you do realize who that is, right?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of inevitability. Blake could only sputter, his words jumbling together. He looked suspicious. The sentence sounded absurd, even to him. Will Smith, for his part, didn't scream or lash out. He sat, dripping wet for a moment, calm, composed, almost like a Zen master in a hoodie. Then he slowly stood, shaking off the remaining coffee with deliberate, theatrical movements. There was a pause, long enough for the audience in the cafe to hold their collective breath, before he finally spoke. "You know," he said, his voice smooth and disarmingly friendly, "most people would just scream or call the manager. But hey, coffee is an acceptable wake-up method." His dry humor floated in the air like a soft breeze, causing a ripple of laughter to spread among the customers. Blake's hands were shaking, and for the first time, he felt the full weight of his overzealous actions. He tried to salvage authority, clearing his throat. "I apologize, sir. I was just trying to maintain order." The words were feeble, and the entire cafe knew it. Will tilted his head, giving a look that blended amusement, pity, and incredulity. "Order," he repeated, mock serious. "Sir, you just threw hot coffee on a man's head, and that's how you maintain order?" There was no anger in his tone, only the kind of wry amusement that made Blake's stomach twist in embarrassment. Meanwhile, the cafe was alive with whispers, snickers, and the unmistakable click of phone cameras. Customers tried not to stare too obviously, but couldn't help themselves. Some were recording, some were whispering, and one bold teenager even whispered to their friend, "This is going straight to TikTok." Blake's attempt to regain control was failing spectacularly. His authoritative posture was crumbling, his uniform suddenly feeling like a costume in the absurdity of the moment. He tried one last lifeline. "Sir, I assure you this is a misunderstanding." But Will's expression said it all. Misunderstanding or not, the officer was completely humiliated. Will Smith didn't lash out, though. Instead, he took a deep breath. Then, with the perfect comedic timing, he lifted his hoodie just slightly, revealing a faint smile. "It's okay," he said, in the kind of calm, controlled voice that could turn a tense room into a comedy club. "We all make mistakes. Some of us just make them wetter than others." A ripple of laughter went through the cafe. Even the most serious-looking patrons were now smiling, sharing glances, and trying not to burst out loud. Blake, meanwhile, had reached peak mortification, realizing that this story would follow him far beyond this cafe. The baristas scrambled with towels and napkins, attempting to mop up the mess. Will crouched just enough to avoid soaking the furniture further, yet he maintained an aura of effortless dignity. Seriously, he added, brushing a few drops off his shoulder, "Next time, maybe ask before caffeinating someone else?" The pun, delivered with perfect timing, made the entire cafe erupt in laughter. Blake shrank further behind his badge, the reality of his viral moment sinking in. As Will turned to leave, the cafe seemed to exhale collectively. People whispered among themselves, recounting the moment already. "He's Will Smith. He's wet. He's amazing." Blake, in a last-ditch effort to salvage some dignity, muttered, "Hope you enjoy your coffee, Sir Smith." Will paused, looked back over his shoulder with that trademark grin, and said, "Next time, I'll buy my own," before disappearing into the busy city streets, leaving behind a trail of stunned patrons, dripping coffee, and one officer utterly humbled. The story didn't end there. Videos from phones began circulating online within minutes, showing the officer's flustered expressions, the barista's suppressed laughter, and Will Smith's serene yet soaked composure. Comments poured in, some mocking the officer, others celebrating Will's charm under pressure. Blake's colleagues couldn't resist teasing him in the precinct the next day, and the barista became a minor celebrity in the local coffee scene for her calm narration of the incident. Meanwhile, Will Smith, ever the professional, simply went on with his day, leaving the city with a story that would live on in meme culture and the cafe's history.